Hey, welcome back to the channel, and today we are reviewing the Fujifilm 80mm macro lens f2.8, and this is a beast of a lens, and I'm going to tell you the good and the bad about this lens and why I'm still going to keep it, but I'm also going to get another macro lens, but I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Why did I buy this lens? Well, I love macro photography. I love shooting flowers and insects. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that before on the channel. This lens is incredibly sharp. You can use this lens not only for macro photography, you can use it as a portrait lens, you can use it as a mid-telephoto lens. The only drawbacks are that it's heavy. It's a heavy lens, and I'll cover that in just a minute. We'll talk about it. It's a true one-to-one macro lens, and it's got a linear motor, it's got weather sealing, it's got optical image stabilization, yeah, there you go. I mean, it has everything that you would be looking for in a macro lens, and it's got the autofocus, right? So a lot of the other macro lenses that you can get, third-party ones, you're going to be manual focus. Macro photography for me is I get to photograph beautiful flowers, insects, things out in nature, but it can also be for those that want to do product photography or some detailed photography where you actually need to really show a close-up of an item in full detail. It's kind of like a microscope, you know, where you can really drill down and take a look at things. And it opens up a whole other world. You'll be amazed. I can remember, oh gosh, maybe 15 years ago, I was laying on the lawn with my macro lens on my Canon 5D Mark II, or it might have even been the Canon Rebel, but I was laying on the lawn and there was clover there. And I was photographing honeybees that were all over the clover. And I was just laying there with the camera, just resting on the ground and shooting with that 60mm macro lens that Canon had. And I was able to get some really beautiful detailed shots of these bees where you could see so close up, you can see the hairs on their body, and it just transports you into a whole other world. And that's the world of macro photography, right? So once you do it, if it's something that resonates with you and you like, you're going to want to keep doing things like that. For me, gosh, for the past 15 years, I have always wanted to make sure I had a macro lens and that I took some time to do macro photography. It's been a favorite of mine. All of that covered, that's kind of why I love macro and what it is. This lens is probably the best macro lens that Fuji has for the XF lenses, for the X cameras. I have the X-T5 now, and that's my primary lens for shooting macro and for shooting photography. This lens, beautiful images, they're just tack sharp. You don't have to get as close as you do with the Fujifilm 30mm macro lens. It's the newer one that came out recently. You have to get right on top of something to get it to fill the frame because it's 30mm instead of 80mm. You get image stabilization with this in the lens, and if your body is stabilized, they kind of work together. I don't know what kind of magic they use to do that, but they do, and you get better image stabilization. Some really nice features of this lens are you've got this beautiful switching here. So you have the on and off for the image stabilization, and you also have a limiter switch, which is a focus limiter switch. What this switch lets you do is tell the lens, hey, don't bother trying to focus far away. I just want you to focus between your minimum focusing distance, which is 9.8 inches and about 25 centimeters, right? And just go from there to half a meter. All right, and so then don't bother trying to focus on anything outside of there. So that makes the focusing a bit quicker, and it stays in that range that you want to focus on. It's got 3 settings on this switch. The first one is full, which will just do the entire range from 9.8 inches all the way to infinity. And then you can switch it here to the next one, which would be 0.5 meters to infinity. So that means it's not going to focus real close up. It's going to start at 1/2 meter and go all the way to infinity. And then the last switch, all the way over to the right, this is where you get the real macro capability that you're looking for. And that is going to be to focus between like 10 inches here all the way to 1/2 meter, right? So that will give you the ability to get really close to insects, flowers, whatever object. Even if you're just photographing a lens cap or something, you'll be able to get right in, fill up the whole frame with that item. So that's what this here allows you to do. And these are the really good benefits of this. The images are tack sharp. The lens is really well made. It's metal. It's got a nice big focus ring here that is easy to grab onto. And it rotates to an infinity, so it just keeps turning. The aperture ring right here has a nice click to it. It's got good resistance to it. It has an A for automatic, but it doesn't lock like the 23mm lenses do. Like this lens here, this one actually locks so that you can't move it out of the A position unless you press this little button here. You press this button, and now you can move it out and move it around. You can't get it back into the A unless you press the button either. So that's the difference between these newer linear motor lenses and this one here. The other negative on this lens, or at least it's a concern, and I'll explain why in just a second, why I think it is a concern when you go to resell this lens or buy this lens, is this. Okay, so this clunking sound is because there's two separate floating elements and they are loose. So they're just floating around in here. They stop floating when you attach it to your camera and power the camera on. Everything locks up into place then, and when you move it, you don't have that anymore. The only thing is, I have noticed that the resale value on these has dropped quite a bit, and I'm wondering if it has to do with the weight, the size, and the clunking sound. It's a concern for people when they first get it. I've seen on eBay where they specifically mention, just so you know, there's two floating elements and they make a clunking sound, your lens is not broken. So if you buy this lens and you hear this, it's not broken. You don't need to send it in for service or anything like that. It's not broken. This is what it does. The downside on that is, if you're lugging it around in your backpack and you're tossing things around, you're going to be worrying, am I damaging this by banging it all around? And the answer is, I don't know if you are, but I haven't had any problems with it in the past year that I've had it. It works beautifully when it's powered on. I haven't had anything. Of course, I'm more careful with this lens and more gentler with it because of this, because I know it's loose. Like this doesn't do it. It's got a little teeny bit, you can hear something in it, but nothing really. Nothing like this. My Viltrox 13mm is completely silent. It doesn't make a single sound when you shake it, right? The 70 to 30mm, it does make some noise when you shake it, right? But nothing like this. This is loud. This is like you think something's loose and broken in here. The other thing with this lens, and the limiter switch helps solve that, is it can be a little slower to focus, especially when you have it set on full, because it's not really sure, am I looking for something close up? Am I looking for something far away? So use the limiter switch for when you are doing macro work. Once you start using it for like a portrait shot, it'll get the swing of kind of where you're focusing, and it'll do a little bit better. It's not going to be as fast as, say, like the 90mm lens or the 56 1.2, although nobody could really say the original one was ever really very fast. But I have heard the 50mm 1.0 is very fast. It's a linear motor, so that would be, those would be probably better options if you were just looking for a portrait lens. This can double as both though. So for me, wondering now, do I keep my 56 1.2, the original, or do I just go ahead and sell that and just use this for pretty much my macro work? And if I needed to use it as a portrait lens, could I just do that as well? That might be something to consider. The other thing is that when you're using a macro lens, f2.8, right, you're going to be tempted to want to shoot this, wide open and let all the light in, but the plane of focus is going to be razor thin. You'll be shooting an insect and you'll get like part of their head in focus and all the rest will be out of focus. So you're going to have to stop down that lens, which means it's going to let less light in. You're either going to have to bump up your ISO or you're going to have to use a flash to throw some light on that to keep your shutter speed fast, and so that you can freeze motion, especially with insects, so that you can freeze that motion. You're going to need a flash and to be able to keep your ISO down. So that's something to consider. Given that, what I've done is I've purchased one of these on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the description for the flash that I'm using and for this here and for the lens. If you want to check out all the specs on the lens, I'll leave a link down for that as well. This comes in really handy because this just fits right over your lens like this, and then you mount it on your camera, right? And you've got your flash. And so when the flash fires, it fires through the diffuser on here, and then it fires through this diffuser as well. And that will disperse that light and make it a lot softer, so you won't have any harsh light hitting whatever it is you're photographing. That's great for the photography side. For doing video, you're probably going to want to be on a tripod, have some kind of extra lighting. So I sometimes use my Aperture MC and I can be able to put this on here. I've got a little tabletop tripod that I can mount this on and kind of set it on the ground or wherever it is I'm working to do a macro shot, so you can kind of angle your light to get it where you want for video. That might be helpful. You might even be able to use this for photography too, but a lot of times you're going to want to probably set your aperture to f8 or f11 to try to get as much depth of field in if you're just doing video or a single shot photography. One other option is to do focus stacking, and I'm going to cover that in a separate video, just to give you an example of how you would do focus stacking with the Fujifilm X-T5 using this lens, and maybe I'm going to be using Affinity Photo 2, but you can do the exact same thing in Photoshop as well. So what that does is it gives you the ability to take a series of images, and each image is stepping back and the plane of focus keeps moving. So it's getting, say, the front part of the flower in focus, and then the middle part of the flower in focus, and then the end of the flower in focus, and merging those photos together to get one image where the whole flower is in focus. That's what focus stacking and focus merging will do. Let's talk about the price of the lens. It's $11.99 retail, which is going to be probably out of the budget for any beginner, and for a lot of people who are avid hobbyists. Anybody who isn't making money from their photography, this is going to be a big investment to get. So what I did was I bought mine on eBay. I've been a seller on eBay for 25 years. I don't do it anymore, but years and years ago, I had a store and was selling a lot of stuff on eBay, and I've sold like 13,000 items in my eBay life. And I know a lot about how eBay works, and I do know that as of today in 2024, eBay has a lot of protections for buyers, so you don't have to worry very much about purchasing something and not getting what it is you thought you were getting. If you're a seller, it's a little bit harder these days to be a seller because buyers definitely have more rights when it comes to disputes than sellers do. In general, I'm just being very non-specific here about it. What I did was, my tips are I look for a seller that is in the United States, because that's where I am, that's maybe just a state or two or a few states away from me. That's another thing I do look for when I'm buying. I'll look for lots of good photographs and a good feedback history on a seller. I'm not going to buy from somebody that hasn't sold anything on eBay yet. I'm going to look for somebody that writes a good description and is not being just so general, like they've cut and paste something from a product page. I'd like to read something like, I'm a photographer, I'm an amateur photographer, I bought this lens a few years ago, I haven't really used it, it's been on the shelf, here's the photos, I have the box, I have this. That's somebody I'm interested in buying from, right? And that's exactly how I got this lens. The seller had bought it on B&H, they had their receipt for B&H, they said that they used it once or twice, been sitting in the box, they just decided that it wasn't right for them, they were changing camera systems. That happens a lot, and that's where you can get a good deal, is somebody who's changing camera systems. If you try to sell this lens, like a used one, to KEH or B&H, you're going to get about $440 as of today, as the day I'm recording this. Somewhere between $420 and $430 they're going to offer you for it. So if you're a seller and you're on eBay, you might be able to get $675, which is exactly what I paid for this. It was pristine. There was not a blemish on here. And one of the things that I bought years and years ago was this little light, magnifying glass light. It's called a Quasar 7X. So you turn it on and it's got magnifying glass here and these lights. Looks like alien lights going across, doesn't it? It reminds me of some movie. I'm trying to think what it was I saw. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, this thing, it's not cheap to buy. I mean, I've bought it at least 10, 12 years ago, and it just takes 2 little batteries that you put in here. So that's great. You don't have to recharge it or do any of that stuff. It's like old school. But you can take a good look in your lens when you get it, and you can see every little flaw. You can see if there's any fungus growing in your lens. You can see if there's any specks, any marks on the inside of the lens. You can pretty much see anything that's on there. And it's great when you're cleaning your lens to make sure that you've cleaned it well, you didn't leave any smudges or marks on there. So I love this little thing. This thing has just come in handy for so many things. Anytime I buy a used lens, it's the first thing I get out, and I take a look at my lens before I do anything with it. When I got this lens, I took my light out, I checked it, it was beautiful, it was pristine. There's not a single mark on the lens whatsoever. So for me, I got a lens that was just brand new, came with the original box, and I really do like getting the original boxes. I have to compromise sometimes and buy one without a box, but if I have a choice, I will buy the lens with the original box. So it came with the box, the lens hood, the lens wrap, the documentation, it came with everything. So I was super happy. So I encourage you to think about that when you're looking at a lens and thinking, oh my gosh, it's just way too expensive, I'm not going to be able to afford that. Sometimes a little patience pays off. The lens that I'm filming this on right now, I'm filming on the XS20 with that 16mm f2.8 little lens. I think I bought that one on that KEH sale that they had, and it was in pristine condition as well. I loved it. It was great. I love taking macro photography. I'm going to make some more videos on macro. I'll show you how to do some focus merging and focus stacking with the X-T5. And I'm going to cover one more macro lens that I just ordered. And I know I said I wasn't going to get any more lenses, but I couldn't resist. It was on sale, and it was just, it's a good, you'll see it when I do it in the next video. It's just it's a nice little lens, and yeah, I wanted it, I bought it, and I'll have to sell another lens, I'm sure, but I don't know which one. It might be that 56 1.2. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. We're getting close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm all excited. Henry's all excited. He can't wait to be in the video when we cross over 1,000 subscribers. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.